Welcome to another episode of Gung Ho. Today is September 4th, 2021, and I'm back with Jay Goldberg. I can't say enough about him. I've been talking to him, I've been reading about him, and in my opinion, he's a very special person. He's very intelligent, he's got a good heart, he's an incredible lawyer. He just published a book called The Courtroom is My Theater. And I also saw him interviewed on the Jewish broadcasting system. And I was really impressed, and I don't get impressed too often. So here he is, and we're going to continue talking about, I call it the criminal injustice system. And we'll start, but we mentioned on the very first show Afghanistan, and we were talking about presidents should have experience, combat experience, have served before they take over our forces. And we went through a lot of examples. And you started out, I think, with Bush 43.
Well, I don't think it's necessary that the commander-in-chief have active duty experience. Abraham Lincoln didn't. FDR didn't. And they were able to maintain a certain distance that made them the subject of positive reviews in everything they did. I think the key is to have a person who can rise above politics, who could do what is best for the country, even though it may offend people in his party. Lyndon Johnson was able to get the Civil Rights Act of 1965 passed when the Southern Democrats were deeply opposed to what he was doing. But he pursued it because he believed it to be right. And he didn't have combat experience either. So I don't know, Joe, that the commander-in-chief requires combat experience. It requires courage and the ability to rise above politics.
The three people that you have mentioned were exceptional people.
What is that?
They were exceptional, those
right.
three people.
Well, the country was fortunate.
But we've had a series of presidents that didn't serve in combat, that avoided going to war, like Bush 43 and Clinton and Giannini and Cheney. All these people that were, wanted to go to war, knew nothing about war, including Obama, and they got us into 2 wars. And Obama was the longest serving war president, 7 years in Afghanistan. So some of these people were pushed around by the military-industrial complex. They couldn't stand up to them like John F. Kennedy could. He could, because he was in the service and in combat. But some of these recent leaders, no. It's tragic if a leader caves into his Joint Chiefs of Staff or people around him and takes us to war. And we just keep doing this. But, like you said, there are private interests involved.
But Joe, it's interesting to point out that the person with the most combat experience, Dwight Eisenhower, during his tenure, we were not involved in any war. He saw firsthand what it was like to have a country at war, to stick your nose into other people's affairs, country-wise. And he kept our country free from war during his tenure. Remember, he was the president who built the interstate road systems. He occupied himself with programs that made our life better and more convenient. So it's odd. that the man with the most combat experience knew how dangerous war was, and he kept us from war, while the presidents who don't know what war is have no hesitancy in involving us in wars. The one that comes to my mind as the chief offender of the policy that I hold here, that the government should not involve itself in other countries' affairs, is Obama and Bush, who had no hesitancy about involving us in what amounted to endless wars. And so I think in many ways you're right, that a man with combat experience knows what war is and keeps us from war. And those who don't know what war is have no compunction about bringing us into a active war status. And that's a terrible thing for this country. You can't find a better example of a person who doesn't understand the risks of war than Obama, Trump, and Biden, as they pursue a policy that can only lead and has led to failure and the loss of respect for this country.
Jay, I want to give you a personal experience. Years ago, I met a young Marine just back from Iraq. His name was Doug Webb. He was in trouble with the law, and one of my surfing buddies said, help him, so I did. I got the case dismissed in furtherance of justice because of his experiences in the Marine Corps, combat and everything else. The judge threw the case out. Obama, in 2012, was on Bagram Air Base. He was in a big hangar, it looked like, and he was standing in front of two armored vehicles. They were huge vehicles, and telling us that we have to continue this war. We're doing the right thing. We have to win this war. The same day, my friend Doug, you know, now they can go back to their base and email people. They could actually call you. He went back to his base and he emailed me. And he said, this is the worst shithole in the world, talking about Afghanistan. He said, we got hit today. I had to pretend to be dead for hours. That's how I survived. Meanwhile, Obama's on Bagram Air Base saying we're going to stay here and do the job. And he has no idea. And, you know, and when he came home, and I was just an Afghan veteran, came to see me Tuesday. One tour in Iraq, two in Afghanistan. He said the whole thing was crazy. The whole thing was crazy, the wars. And these leaders don't understand what they're doing. You send these Americans out there in their prime.
Yeah. You know, we haven't won a war since we defeated Hitler and Japan. We stuck our nose in Korea. We stuck our nose in Vietnam, Afghanistan. And as strong as we think we are, we failed in all these missions because as God is our judge, we were never meant to police areas as far away as Afghanistan and Korea, and we suffered terribly. When I say we, I'm talking about the mothers who raised children only to see them pass for a cause that years later can never be justified. McNamara, who was behind the war in Vietnam, wrote a book saying in effect, he was sorry for all that he did to encourage the war that he pursued. But it's too late for the Gold Star families to accept an apology. And McNamara never served either. It's very important to recognize that the person that had the most experience of any president, I would think since Washington, Dwight Eisenhower, made it his business to keep us from sticking our nose in the affairs of other countries' conduct and form of government, to allow our country to grow strong and independent without wasting resources and the lives of young men. And my hat's off to Dwight Eisenhower. You won't find his name in the top 5 or 10 presidents, but he is somebody who's worthy of enormous accolades. And I just think I'm happy to be here because I sense that I've even given you, Joe, something to think about when you talk about combat experience, when you think about Eisenhower and Eisenhower's statement that war is hell. And it is. And you can't. Think about it. Raising a child, going with that child to school, homework, love and devotion, only to have that kid taken from the parents and killed. And it's so easy to say, oh, we lost 2,700 lives. But every one is critical. And a child is a very important entity that has not been properly recognized for the worth that they provide to society. They're just a number, and that's terrible.
I want to, we're going to do this whole thing, but a personal thing. I went to the VA. I started going there in 2010 and went into Manhattan. And on the second floor, they had an exhibit, all kinds of different things about different wars. And they had some things about Vietnam. And they had a quote from a general, a Marine Corps general, saying basically what you said. My heart goes out to the mothers of these boys that have been sent here to this place, and this is not the right place to be. You know, this is a Marine general saying, we should not be here. My heart goes out to them. Underneath that saying was a photograph of a Marine. He was one of my friends, Tom Keppen. Right after that photograph was taken, he was killed. We had been together for a while. And one of the things I had, and after he got killed, I was in the rear one day and they said, someone has to inventory, his personal belongings. So we all had sea bags in the rear. So I had an inventory, all these sea bags. It's his sea bag. And I am doing the inventory, and at the bottom of the sea bag is a pack of letters. They were from children in grammar school. To him, he was a teacher. He taught in grammar school.
Yes.
And then he became a Marine officer. And that, and he was a very good officer. And that thing about mothers losing their child, I don't think there's anything worse than losing a child when they're young.
Every death involves the depression of 70 people, aunts, uncles, relatives, extended families. We think of a number, But that number has to be increased by how it affects the extended family concerned with one soldier. It's not the death of a soldier, it's the death of a family, an extended family. And it's just awful. You know, while we're at this, Joe, I have to tell you this. I'm a student of the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln, in 4 years, lost 700,000 people, 2% of the population. It would be equal to 8 million people. You'll find in your studies that the loss of life in the Civil War was 700,000 people. And it's easy to throw lives away. And if you visit the battlegrounds, you'll see that there are gravestones of unknown soldiers, but they were known to their families. And war is hell, and nobody can support it. You have to avoid it. And I hope, but yet I don't have much satisfaction that it'll be honored, but there can't be a war in a foreign country in which we seek to impose our form of government on another country. Their culture is different, and it's a shame. But Afghanistan, all they do is fight. They wake up in the morning, they fight. That's their culture. We can't change it. We have a lot to do here in the United States about improving roads and things that would benefit you, me, and the rest of the people who might be seeing this show. And by the way, I didn't compliment you for your contribution to the practice of criminal law as you plied the trade in the Eastern District of New York. And I thank you for your contribution to that service. And your service wasn't only in the military, it was in the field of criminal justice and the American system of criminal justice, which is broken. We don't have to spend time fixing up the governments in foreign countries. The American system of criminal justice is broken. Innocent people are prosecuted and sent to jail. And I might give you a number that would surprise you. Wikipedia says there are 120,000 innocent people serving time in prison. The number is rather conservative. It has been said that there are 300,000 people who are sitting in 8x12 cells when they are innocent of the crime that they've been convicted of. Innocent people. Our system is broken, the criminal justice system. We have work to do here in the United States to remedy that, without sticking our nose into the affairs of other countries. Let's fix what's broken here, because what's broken here harms innocent people. And a study I've made shows, unfortunately, that it tends to be black Americans abused by the Southern system of justice that brings innocent people into the criminal justice system. There's nothing as horrendous as being in the sights of a malevolent prosecutor. It's worse than perhaps being in the sights of an enemy soldier, because it can destroy your life, your liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. And that's what the American system is in the criminal justice area. So we've got a lot of work to do at home without sticking our nose into the affairs of the problems of other countries.
Jay, I just want to mention that we didn't realize this until just recently, but we were on a really big case together. USA v. Frank Coppola, where the government said that the mafia had infiltrated Wall Street. They set up a bogus brokerage. We were co-counsel in that case, and we didn't even realize it until just recently.
Yeah, and the Coppola case dealt with a very interesting point, the way the government withholds helpful proof that might affect the verdict in a criminal case, and they hide that evidence from the defendant who's on trial. Official misconduct is one of the 6 factors that interfere with the right to a fair and just trial. And I've spent my time trying to pursue the persons who find themselves with no sponsor, no relative to push on their behalf, the criminal justice system, and they sit in a cell for years, for decades, but they don't belong there because the government has chosen to hide proof that would help them secure their innocence. I give this story, Joe, if I could just tell you. There was a man tending his garden, when 6 FBI agents arrived at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning as he was doing his weeding, and with long guns, and they arrested him for being part of a Madrid bombing. And the government claimed that even though a fingerprint had been found, which was unable to be identified for years, the FBI finally found a match, and it was to a man named Brian Mayfield. It's a case of enormous importance. They found that even though the rest of the world had failed to make a match to this Madrid bombing, the FBI alone, despite Interpol's inability to match the fingerprint, the FBI matched the fingerprint, and the man was arrested and had to sit in prison. Well, lo and behold, it was determined later on that the fingerprint analysis by the FBI was an error. Yes, we think of the fingerprint analysis as the gold standard in forensic science, but it's not. It's subject to error, and forensic science is what accounts for enormous numbers of wrongful convictions. And I only mention this because there is a need to look into the criminal justice system, to look at the instances where people have been convicted, and I say to you that that war is a war that has to be waged to protect people, innocent, but nonetheless pursued by a malevolent prosecutor. Now that the war is supposedly over, I want the government to turn to those 300,000 people and say, it's time to review cases where people have steadfastly asserted their innocence, but have not found a champion to pursue their case. And that's what I'm here for. I feel very strongly that there's a need to look into the way the criminal justice system functions in the United States. Think about it. 300,000 people, innocent, but sitting in a jail for decades with nobody to champion their cause.
We're about to end. We have a minute. What about the people, the prosecutors that put away innocent people? Do you
Yes,
think
the prosecutors put away innocent people, and but I don't think they set out to say a person is innocent and I'm going to put him away. They have a mindset. They fasten on a belief that a particular person is the person who committed the robbery or the murder, and they pursue that person to a point where it's not worth living. Because when you get in that sights, as I said, it's like the sights of a gun. There's no escape. There was a man in Mississippi, Curtis Flowers, who was tried 6 times. 6 times. The case was finally...
We're done. We have to pick it up. We're done. First show.
Old time. Where have my old friends gone? Where are they now? Used to be a walk away in my hometown, but they're so far away, as far as fuck can be. But in my heart they're close to. Yes, in my heart they're close to. In my